You know that feeling on night drives, when the road becomes something alive, something watching. The highway holds secrets, dark secrets. Lock your doors. Trust your instincts, because you're never alone out there. Something's always waiting in the darkness for a wrong turn, a stranger's face, a voice on the radio. The highway never forgets. It never lets go. And what follows you home is always worse. I've been driving trucks for 15 years, hauling freight across the country. I've seen it all: storms, accidents, weird people at rest stops, but nothing prepared me for what happened on Interstate 40 last November. I was making a late-night run from Oklahoma City to Memphis. The roads were empty, just me and the hum of my engine. Around 2 a.m., a thick fog rolled in out of nowhere. It was the kind of fog that swallows your headlights and makes you feel like you're driving through milk. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. I slowed down to 40 miles per hour, gripping the wheel tight, my eyes straining to see the road ahead. That's when I first noticed the car. A black sedan appeared in my rearview mirror, staying exactly 3 car lengths behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Plenty of drivers follow trucks in bad weather because our taillights help them see the road. But something about this car felt wrong. It matched my speed perfectly. When I slowed down, it slowed down. When I sped up slightly, it sped up. I tried changing lanes to let it pass. The car changed lanes with me, staying in that same position behind me like it was tethered to my truck. My heart started racing. I told myself it was just a nervous driver using me as a guide, but the way it moved felt deliberate, calculated. I reached for my CB radio to see if any other truckers were nearby, but all I got was static. The fog seemed to be getting thicker, pressing against my windows like something alive. I glanced at my mirrors again, and that's when I saw it. The car had no headlights on. Just 2 dark holes where the lights should be, and I could barely make out the shape of the vehicle through the fog. How was the driver even seeing? How were they following me so precisely in complete darkness? I felt a chill run down my spine. I pressed harder on the gas, pushing my truck up to 60, which was dangerous in that fog, but I didn't care. I needed to lose this car. It accelerated with me, maintaining that exact distance. I tried slowing down to 30. Same thing. It was like a shadow, stuck to me no matter what I did. Then I noticed something even more disturbing. Through the fog, I could see a figure in the driver's seat, but they weren't moving. No head turns, no adjustments, just sitting there perfectly still while the car tracked my every move. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but I had no signal. Of course. Middle of nowhere, thick fog, and now this. I considered pulling over, but something in my gut screamed not to stop. If I stopped, that car would stop too, and whatever was in it would be right there with me in the darkness. So I kept driving, my hands shaking, my eyes darting between the road and my mirrors. The fog was so thick now that I couldn't even see the road lines. I was navigating purely by instinct and the faint glow of my dashboard. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, I saw lights ahead. A truck stop. I'd never been so relieved to see civilization in my life. I pulled into the parking lot, my truck lurching as I hit the brakes too hard. I looked in my mirror, expecting to see the black sedan following me in, but it was gone. Just vanished into the fog like it had never been there. I sat there for a full 5 minutes, my heart pounding, scanning the parking lot for any sign of that car. Nothing. I went inside the truck stop, needing coffee and wanting to be around people. The place was nearly empty, just one other trucker and a tired-looking cashier. I told the other driver what happened, thinking maybe he'd laugh it off or tell me I was just spooked by the fog. Instead, his face went pale. He leaned in close and said, "Black sedan? No headlights?" I nodded. He shook his head slowly and said, "You're the 3rd driver this month who's reported that. Nobody knows what it is. Some say it's a ghost car. Others think it's something worse. Whatever it is, it only appears in the fog, and it only follows trucks." I didn't want to believe him, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. He said one driver got so scared that he pulled over despite his instincts. When he got out to confront whoever was following him, the car was empty. Doors locked, windows up, nobody inside. But the engine was running, and the car was warm like someone had just been driving it. The driver ran back to his truck and didn't stop until he hit the next state. I stayed at that truck stop until sunrise, too afraid to get back on the road. When the fog finally lifted and daylight broke through, I forced myself to continue my route. I kept checking my mirrors every few seconds, expecting to see that black sedan appear again. It didn't. But that night changed something in me. Now, whenever I drive through fog, my hands grip the wheel a little tighter. My eyes stay locked on the mirrors a little longer. And if I see a car following too closely with no headlights on, I don't slow down. I don't try to be courteous. I just drive as fast as I safely can until I'm out of that fog because I know what's out there. I know something is watching the highways, following truckers through the darkness, and I pray I never see it again. But here's the part that still haunts me. 2 weeks after that incident, I was scrolling through trucker forums online, reading stories from other drivers. Someone had posted a grainy photo taken from their dash cam. It showed a black sedan with no headlights, following a truck through fog. The timestamp was from 5 years ago. The location was 3 states away from where I encountered it. And in the comments, dozens of truckers shared similar stories, going back decades. Whatever that thing is, it's been out there for a long time, and it's still following trucks through the fog, waiting for someone to stop. Story 2, the hitchhiker who wouldn't leave. I picked up a hitchhiker once, and I'll never make that mistake again. It was a cold February night, and I was hauling a load of electronics from Dallas to Chicago. The highway was mostly empty, just the occasional pair of headlights passing in the opposite direction. I'd been driving for about 6 hours straight and was thinking about finding a rest stop when I saw him. A man standing on the shoulder of the road with his thumb out. He was wearing a dirty jacket and jeans, and he had a small backpack. Nothing about him seemed particularly threatening. Just another guy down on his luck needing a ride. I don't usually pick up hitchhikers. Company policy says not to, and most truckers will tell you it's asking for trouble. But something about that night made me feel generous. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe I was just lonely and wanted someone to talk to. I pulled over, and he jogged up to the passenger door. I rolled down the window and asked, "Where you headed?" He smiled, and his teeth were yellow and crooked. "Chicago," he said. "Same direction as you." I didn't remember telling him where I was going, but I figured he just assumed since we were on a major interstate. I unlocked the door, and he climbed in. For the first hour, everything seemed fine. He didn't talk much, just stared out the window at the darkness rushing past. I tried making small talk, asking him where he was from, what he did for work, the usual stuff. His answers were vague. Here and there, he'd say. A bit of everything. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, and I had to strain to hear him over the engine. But he seemed harmless enough, so I stopped trying to force conversation and focused on driving. Then things started getting weird. Around midnight, I noticed he was staring at me. Not just glancing over occasionally, but full-on staring with his head turned toward me and his eyes locked on my face. I tried to ignore it, but it was making my skin crawl. "You okay, man?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring. Finally, he said, "You have kind eyes." That's rare. The way he said it made my stomach turn. It wasn't a compliment. It sounded like an observation, like he was cataloging my features for some reason. I decided right then that I wanted him out of my truck. I told him I was getting tired and needed to stop at the next rest area. He could find another ride from there. He didn't respond. He just went back to staring out the window. 20 minutes later, I pulled into a rest stop. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a couple of cars and one other truck at the far end. I put the truck in park and turned to tell him this was his stop. But he was already looking at me with that same unsettling stare. "I think I'll stay with you a bit longer," he said. His voice was still soft, but there was something cold underneath it now. I felt a spike of fear. "No, man, this is where you get out," I said, trying to sound firm. He smiled again, and this time it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't think so." My heart started pounding. I reached for the door handle, ready to get out and walk to the rest stop building where there were other people, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was strong, way stronger than I expected. "Let go of me," I said, my voice shaking. He leaned in close, and I could smell something rotten on his breath. "You invited me in. You don't get to kick me out." I yanked my arm away and shoved the door open, practically falling out of the truck. I ran toward the rest stop building, not looking back, my legs pumping as fast as they could. I burst through the doors and found a security guard sitting at a desk. I told him there was a man in my truck who wouldn't leave and was threatening me. The guard, a big guy in his 50s, grabbed his flashlight and radio and followed me back outside. We approached my truck, and I pointed to the passenger side. "He's in there," I said. The guard shone his flashlight through the window. The cab was empty. No sign of the hitchhiker. No backpack. Nothing. "You sure he was in there?" the guard asked, looking at me like I might be crazy. I climbed back into the truck and checked everywhere, under the seats, in the sleeper cab, even the storage compartments. He was gone. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. The passenger door was still locked from the inside. I had unlocked it to let him in, but I never heard him lock it again. And there's no way he could have gotten out and locked it from the outside. I spent the rest of the night in the rest stop parking lot with my doors locked, too afraid to keep driving. When the sun came up, I inspected my truck again in the daylight. That's when I found it. Scratched into the dashboard on the passenger side were 3 words, "I'm still here." The letters were crude, like they'd been carved with a fingernail or a knife. I felt like I was going to be sick. I reported it to the police, but they didn't take it seriously. They said I probably scratched it myself and didn't remember, or maybe it was there before and I just noticed it. But I know what I saw. I know that man was in my truck, and somehow, he vanished. Since that night, strange things have been happening. Sometimes when I'm driving alone at night, I hear breathing coming from the sleeper cab even though no one is there. I'll catch a glimpse of someone sitting in the passenger seat out of the corner of my eye, but when I turn to look, there's nothing. My CB radio will turn on by itself and all I hear is static mixed with what sounds like whispering. I've had my truck blessed. I've had mechanics check every inch of it. Nothing helps. Other truckers have told me stories about a hitchhiker who appears on that same stretch of highway. He gets into trucks and refuses to leave. Some drivers say he's a ghost, a man who died on that road years ago and now traps truckers in some kind of loop. Others think he's something worse, something that feeds on fear. I don't know what he was, but I know he's not done with me. Every time I drive that route, I see him standing on the shoulder with his thumb out. And every time I speed past, my heart racing, praying he doesn't find another way into my truck. Because I know if he gets back in, I might not be able to get him out again. Story 3, the rest stop that wasn't there. I took a wrong turn once, and I ended up in a place that shouldn't exist. It was late September, and I was hauling furniture from Atlanta to Nashville. The route was straightforward, one I'd driven dozens of times. But somewhere around the Tennessee border, I missed my exit. It happens. You zone out for a second, and suddenly you're 5 miles past where you needed to be. No big deal. I figured I'd take the next exit, circle back, and get on track. But that next exit took me onto a road I didn't recognize. It was a narrow 2-lane highway with no street lights and dense forest on both sides. My GPS kept saying recalculating but couldn't seem to find my location. I wasn't too worried at first. I'd just follow the road until I found a town or another highway. But after 20 minutes of driving, I started to feel uneasy. There were no signs. No mile markers. No other cars. Just endless dark road and trees that seemed to lean in toward me like they were watching. Then I saw it. A rest stop. It appeared suddenly, lit up by a few flickering streetlights. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds, and there was a single building that looked like it hadn't been maintained in decades. But I needed to figure out where I was, and my phone still had no signal. I pulled in, the gravel crunching under my tires. The place was completely empty. No other vehicles. No signs of life. The building had a faded sign that said rest area, but no other identifying information. I climbed out of my truck, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. No crickets. No wind. No distant sound of traffic. Just absolute, suffocating silence. It was wrong. Nature is never that quiet. I walked toward the building, my footsteps sounding way too loud in the stillness. The door was unlocked, and I pushed it open. Inside was a small lobby with a few vending machines and a hallway leading to restrooms. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, and the air smelled stale, like the place had been closed for years. But the lights were on. Dim and flickering, but on. I approached one of the vending machines. It was one of those old models from the 1980s, the kind you don't see anymore. The snacks inside looked faded and ancient, but the machine was humming like it was working. I was about to leave when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the hallway. My heart jumped into my throat. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. Just more footsteps, getting closer. I backed toward the door, my hand on my phone even though I knew I had no signal. A figure emerged from the hallway. It was a man, dressed in a rest stop attendant uniform that looked decades out of date. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were sunken and dark. He smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming from far away even though he was standing right in front of me. I stammered something about being lost and needing directions. He kept smiling. "You're not lost," he said. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." I didn't like the way he said that. I told him I needed to get back to the interstate. He tilted his head, studying me like I was some kind of curiosity. "No one leaves," he said. "Not once they stop here." My blood went cold. I turned and ran for the door, throwing it open and sprinting back to my truck. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps matching my pace exactly, but when I looked back, he was still standing in the doorway, watching me with that horrible smile. I jumped into my truck, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I threw it into gear, peeling out of that parking lot as fast as I could. I didn't care about the road. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away from that place. I drove for what felt like hours, the dark forest blurring past on both sides. Then, suddenly, I was back on the interstate. Just like that. 1 second I was on that narrow road, the next I was merging onto the highway I recognized. My GPS came back online, and my phone showed full signal. I pulled over at the first normal rest stop I found, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. I went inside, needing to see normal people, normal lights, normal anything. The place was busy, families and truckers moving around, everything bright and clean and real. I asked the cashier if she knew about a rest stop on a back road near the Tennessee border, describing what I had seen. She looked at me strangely and said there was no rest stop like that anywhere around here. She'd lived in the area her whole life and had never heard of it. I didn't know what to say. I got back in my truck and tried to find that road again, but I couldn't. Every exit I took led to normal streets and towns. It was like that place had vanished, or maybe it had never existed at all. But I know what I saw. I know that attendant was real, and I know he said no one leaves. I've driven that route dozens of times since then, always during the day, always making sure I don't miss my exit. Because I'm terrified that if I end up on that road again, I might not make it back. And next time, that attendant might make sure I stay. Story 4, the truck that followed me home. Last year, I finished a long haul from Denver to Portland. It was a grueling 3-day trip, and I was exhausted by the time I got home. I live in a small town in Oregon, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and nothing exciting ever happens. I pulled my truck into my driveway around 11 p.m., shut off the engine, and just sat there for a minute, grateful to be home. That's when I noticed another truck parked across the street. It was a big rig, similar to mine but older and more beat up. The cab was dark, and I couldn't see anyone inside. I thought maybe it belonged to another trucker in the neighborhood, someone making a delivery or just passing through. I grabbed my bag and went inside, too tired to think much about it. My wife was already asleep, and I didn't want to wake her, so I crashed on the couch. When I woke up the next morning, the truck was still there. Same spot, same dark cab. Now I was curious. I walked over to check it out, thinking maybe the driver needed help or had broken down. As I got closer, I noticed the truck looked abandoned. The paint was faded and peeling. The tires were worn down to almost nothing. The windows were so dirty I couldn't see inside. I knocked on the driver's side door. No response. I tried the handle. Locked. I walked around the truck, looking for any signs of who it belonged to or why it was parked on my street. There was no company logo, no license plate, nothing. Just a dirty, old truck that looked like it hadn't been driven in years. But the engine was still warm. I could feel the heat radiating from the hood. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I went back inside and called the non-emergency police line. I told them there was an abandoned truck on my street and asked if they could send someone to check it out. They said they'd send an officer by later that day. I went about my morning, trying to shake the weird feeling that truck gave me. Every time I looked out the window, it was still there, sitting in the exact same spot like it was waiting for something. Around noon, a police officer showed up. I watched from my window as he walked around the truck, peering in the windows and trying the doors just like I had. He spent about 5 minutes examining it, then came to my door. "That your truck?" he asked. I told him no, I'd never seen it before yesterday. He frowned. "That's strange. There's no registration, no VIN number that I can find. It's like it doesn't officially exist." He said he'd have it towed, and I thanked him. He left, and I assumed that would be the end of it. But the truck wasn't there when the tow truck arrived 2 hours later. I watched the tow driver pull up, look around confused, and then drive away. The police truck was gone. Just vanished in the middle of the day on a quiet residential street with no one seeing it leave. I called the officer back, and he seemed just as confused as I was. He said he'd check nearby streets, maybe someone had moved it. But I had a sinking feeling it wasn't on any nearby street. That night, I was watching TV when I heard an engine idling outside. I looked out the window, and my blood ran cold. The truck was back. Same spot. Same dark cab. But now the engine was running, and I could see the exhaust coming from the pipes. I grabbed my phone and called the police again, but by the time they arrived 15 minutes later, the engine had shut off and the truck was just sitting there like before. The officer checked it again, but this time he couldn't even get near it. He said every time he tried to approach the driver's side, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread that made him step back. He admitted he'd never felt anything like it in 20 years of police work. He suggested I stay inside and call if anything else happened. For the next week, that truck appeared every night. Always in the same spot. Always with the engine running for a few minutes before shutting off. I stopped sleeping in my own bedroom because the window faced the street, and I couldn't stand seeing that truck sitting there in the darkness. My wife thought I was losing my mind. She couldn't see what I saw. To her, the street was empty. But I knew that truck was there, even if she couldn't see it. I started researching, trying to find any information about ghost trucks or phantom vehicles. That's when I found stories from other truckers. Stories about a truck that follows people home after long hauls. Some said it was the ghost of a driver who died on the road and now haunts other truckers. Others believed it was something darker, a warning that death was coming. The stories all had one thing in common: if the truck stayed for more than 2 weeks, something terrible happened to the person seeing it. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move. I couldn't ignore it. And I couldn't make it go away. On the 13th night, I decided to confront it. I walked outside, my heart pounding, and approached the truck. As I got closer, the driver's side door swung open on its own. The cab was empty, but the seat was still warm like someone had just gotten out. On the dashboard was a piece of paper. I grabbed it and ran back inside. The paper had one sentence written in shaky handwriting: "Your time is coming." I haven't seen the truck since that night. It's been 3 months, and my street has been empty. But I don't feel relieved. I feel like I'm waiting for whatever that truck was warning me about. Every time I get in my own truck to start a new haul, I check my mirrors obsessively. I look for that old, beat-up truck following behind me. And sometimes, late at night on empty highways, I think I see it in the distance, its headlights flickering like dying stars. I know it's still out there, and I know it's still watching, waiting for the right moment to come back. Story 5: The Voice on the CB Radio. CB radios are a trucker's lifeline. We use them to communicate with other drivers, get updates on traffic and weather, and just pass the time on long, lonely stretches of highway. I've been using one for over a decade, and I've heard all kinds of things: jokes, warnings, arguments, even ghost stories shared between drivers at 3 a.m. But last March, I heard something on my CB that I can't explain, and it's changed the way I drive forever. I was hauling a load of construction materials from Phoenix to Salt Lake City. The route took me through some of the most desolate parts of the Southwest, long stretches of desert where you can drive for an hour without seeing another vehicle. It was around 1 a.m., and I was fighting to stay awake. The road was hypnotic, just an endless ribbon of asphalt disappearing into darkness. I had my CB on, listening to the occasional chatter from other truckers, hoping someone would say something interesting to keep me alert. That's when I heard her. A woman's voice, soft and scared, cutting through the static. "Please, someone help me. I'm trapped." I immediately grabbed my CB handset. This wasn't normal chatter. This was an emergency. "This is Red Eagle, I copy you. What's your location?" I asked, using my handle. There was silence for a moment, just static. Then her voice came back, weaker this time. "I don't know where I am. It's dark. I can't see anything. Please help me." My heart was racing. I asked her to describe what she could see, any landmarks or road signs. She said she was in a truck, but it wasn't moving. She didn't know how she got there. She sounded terrified, and I could hear her crying. I told her to stay calm, that I'd call for help. But before I could reach for my phone, another voice cut in. A man's voice, deep and cold. "She's not yours to find." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Who is this?" I demanded. No response. Just heavy breathing coming through the CB. Then the woman's voice came back, screaming now. "He's here. He's in the truck with me. Please, someone help." The scream was cut off abruptly, replaced by static. I was slamming on my brakes, pulling onto the shoulder, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone to call 911. But before I could dial, my CB crackled to life again. The man's voice came back, but this time it was calm, almost amused. "You shouldn't have listened." Then he said something that made my blood turn to ice. He described my truck. The make, model, the company logo on the side. He described what I was wearing. He knew where I was. "I can see you," he said. "You're all alone out here." I looked around frantically, scanning the darkness for any sign of another vehicle. There was nothing. Just empty desert in every direction. I threw my truck into gear and floored it, not caring about speed limits or safety. I just needed to get away from wherever I was. The CB was still on, and I could hear that man's voice laughing, a low, horrible sound that seemed to echo inside my cab. I reached to turn it off, but before I could, the woman's voice came back one last time. "He's coming for you next," she whispered. Then the CB went dead. Complete silence. I tried switching channels, adjusting the frequency, nothing. It was like the radio had been turned off from the inside. I drove for 2 hours straight without stopping, my eyes darting between the road and my mirrors, expecting to see headlights following me. When I finally reached a truck stop just outside of Salt Lake City, I pulled in and immediately checked my truck. I looked in the back, under the cab, everywhere. I was alone. I went inside and asked the clerk if they'd heard anything weird on the CB radio that night. They looked at me like I was crazy and said they didn't have a CB. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, that I'd imagined the whole thing. But when I got back to my truck and turned on the CB, there was a new message saved in the memory. I don't even know how that's possible with my CB model. It doesn't have that feature. But there it was, a timestamp from 1:17 a.m., the exact time I heard the woman's voice. The message was just audio, a recording of her screaming, followed by that man's laughter. I deleted it immediately and almost threw the CB out the window. Since that night, I've heard stories from other truckers about voices on the CB that shouldn't be there. Some say it's a woman who died in a trucking accident years ago, calling for help that never came. Others believe it's something darker, a predator who uses the CB to find isolated drivers. A few truckers claim they've seen a truck with no driver, its CB broadcasting those same voices, luring people to stop. I don't use my CB anymore. I drive in silence now, no music, no radio, nothing. Because every time I turn it on, even for a second, I hear static. And underneath that static, I swear I can hear whispering. I can hear that woman calling for help and that man laughing. And I know if I listen too long, he'll find me. He'll describe my location again, tell me he can see me, and this time, I might not be able to drive away fast enough. Story 6, the highway that loops forever. I don't know if I'll ever make it home. I've been driving for 6 days, and I keep ending up in the same place. It started as a normal haul from Seattle to Boise. A straightforward route I've driven at least 50 times. But somewhere in Idaho, I took a wrong turn. Or at least, I think I did. The GPS said I was on course, but something felt off. The landmarks didn't look right. The towns I passed through seemed empty. And no matter how long I drove, I never seemed to get any closer to my destination. The first time I realized something was wrong was when I saw the same billboard twice. It was an old, faded advertisement for a diner that had closed down years ago. I remembered seeing it about an hour earlier, which didn't make sense because I'd been driving straight the whole time. I figured maybe there were 2 identical billboards, some kind of ad campaign. But then I saw it again. And again. Every hour, that same billboard appeared on the side of the highway, in the exact same spot, with the same rust stains and peeling paint. I pulled over and checked my GPS. It said I traveled 300 miles, but I was somehow still in the same area according to the map. I called my dispatcher, but the call wouldn't go through. No signal. I tried my wife. Same thing. No signal anywhere. I got back on the road, thinking maybe I'd entered some kind of dead zone and just needed to keep driving until I found cell service. But hours passed, and nothing changed. Same empty highway. Same dead trees on both sides. Same faded billboard every 60 minutes. By the 3rd day, I was starting to panic. I'd passed maybe 4 or 5 other vehicles, but every time I tried to flag them down or get their attention, they ignored me. They just drove past like I wasn't there. I stopped at a gas station, a rundown place that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. The pumps were old, the kind you had to manually crank. The building was dark except for one flickering light inside. I went in, desperate for answers, and found an old man behind the counter. "How do I get out of here?" I asked. He looked at me with milky, cataract-filled eyes and smiled. "You don't," he said. "This is the loop. Once you're in, you're in." I demanded to know what he meant. He just kept smiling. Some roads don't go anywhere. They just circle back on themselves over and over. You'll drive and drive, but you'll never leave. You're stuck here now, just like everyone else. I ran out of that gas station and got back in my truck. I didn't care what he said. There had to be a way out. I drove faster, pushing my truck to its limits. But no matter how fast I went, I kept seeing the same landmarks. The same billboard. The same gas station. The same empty road. On the fourth day, I saw another truck parked on the shoulder. I pulled over, hoping the driver could help me. But when I approached, I realized the truck was identical to mine. Same make, same model, same company logo. The driver's side door was open, and inside was a man slumped over the wheel. I shook him, trying to wake him up. He didn't move. When I pulled him back, I screamed. It was me. Same face, same clothes, everything. But he was dead, his skin gray and his eyes empty. I stumbled back, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. That's when I realized the truth. I'd been driving in a loop for so long that I'd caught up to myself. Or maybe I'd always been here, and this was some kind of purgatory for truckers who got lost. I don't know anymore. I don't know what's real. I'm still driving. I have to. If I stop, I'm afraid I'll end up like that version of me, slumped over the wheel, dead and forgotten on this endless highway. Sometimes I see other trucks now, always parked on the shoulder, always with drivers who look just like them slumped inside. I pass the same gas station, the same billboard, the same empty towns. The old man's words echo in my head, "You're stuck here now." If you're reading this, if this somehow gets out, don't take wrong turns. Don't trust your GPS. And if you ever find yourself on a highway that feels wrong, turn around immediately. Don't keep driving. Don't convince yourself it's just a detour. Because some roads don't lead home. They lead to places you can't escape from. And once you're trapped, you'll drive forever, watching the same scenery repeat, slowly losing your mind until you become just another dead driver on the shoulder, waiting for the next version of yourself to find you. I'm tired. So tired. But I keep driving. Because if I stop, the loop wins. And I'll become another ghost on this highway, trapped forever in a loop that never ends. Story 7. The rest stop at exit 666. I know what you're thinking. Exit 666. It sounds made up, like something from a bad horror movie. I thought the same thing when I saw the sign. But I swear on everything I love that this actually happened. I was driving through New Mexico on Interstate 25, hauling machinery parts to Albuquerque. It was around 2 a.m. and I desperately needed to use a restroom and stretch my legs. My GPS showed a rest area coming up in 5 miles. The exit sign appeared in my headlights, exit 666, rest area, 1 mile. I actually laughed. What were the odds? I grabbed my phone to take a photo of the sign, thinking it would be a funny story to tell later. The photo came out completely black, even though my headlights were illuminating the sign perfectly. I tried again. Same result. Just darkness. I brushed it off as a glitch and took the exit. The off-ramp curved away from the highway, longer than usual, winding through scrubby desert. The rest area should have been visible right off the highway, but it was hidden behind a hill. When I finally reached it, the place looked abandoned. The building was old, dating back to the 1960s or 70s by the architecture. The parking lot had weeds growing through cracks in the asphalt. Only one light was working, a flickering pole lamp that cast strange shadows. But I really needed that restroom, so I parked and got out. The air felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. The desert should have had sounds at night, insects, distant animals, but there was nothing. Just oppressive silence. I approached the building. It had that distinctive mid-century modern style, all concrete and angles. The men's room was on the right. I pushed through the door. The lights inside were working, but they were that old yellowish fluorescent that made everything look sick. The floor was surprisingly clean, no dirt or trash, which seemed odd for such a neglected place. 3 stalls, 3 urinals, 2 sinks. I went into the first stall. That's when I noticed the graffiti. Not the usual crude drawings or phone numbers, but words carved deep into the metal walls. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, overlapping and running together. Turn back. Don't stay. He's watching. Count the tiles. That last one was strange and specific. I looked at the floor. White tiles with black diamonds. I started counting them automatically. 1, 2, 3. Something made me stop. I had a sudden, visceral feeling that counting them would be a terrible mistake. I finished my business quickly and went to wash my hands. The mirror above the sink was old and spotted with age. As I washed, I noticed something in the reflection. In the stall I'd just left, the door was slowly opening. I spun around. The door was closed. I looked back at the mirror. In the reflection, it was open. And something was standing in the doorway. A silhouette, too tall and too thin to be human. I bolted from the restroom without drying my hands. Outside, the parking lot was darker than before. The pole lamp had gone out. My truck was still there, but it looked different somehow. Wrong. Like someone had moved it slightly while I was inside. I jogged toward it, keys in hand. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Not running, just walking, but they sounded heavy, like whatever was making them weighed much more than a person should. I didn't look back. I reached my truck, fumbled with the keys, and climbed in. I locked the doors and started the engine. In my side mirror, I saw a figure standing in front of the restroom building. Tall, impossibly tall, with arms that hung too low. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. I put the truck in gear and headed for the exit. But as I drove, I realized something was wrong. The exit road should have led back to the on-ramp, back to the highway. Instead, it curved deeper into the desert, away from the interstate. I followed it anyway, having no choice. After a mile, the road simply ended. Not a turnaround, not a barrier. Just ended, the pavement giving way to sand and rocks. I stopped and grabbed my GPS. No signal. My phone showed no service bars either. I was lost in the New Mexico desert at 2:30 a.m. with no way to navigate and something watching me from the rest area behind. I had to turn around. I had to go back past that building. I executed a slow turn, my headlights sweeping across the desert. For just a moment, they illuminated dozens of vehicles scattered in the darkness beyond the rest area. Old cars, trucks, RVs. All abandoned, windows broken, tires flat. Some looked like they'd been there for decades. I drove back slowly, approaching the rest area. The figure was gone from in front of the building. But as I passed, I saw it in my passenger side window. It was pressed against the glass, looking in at me. I screamed and hit the accelerator. The figure didn't fall away or chase after me. It just vanished, like it had never been there. The road curved back toward the highway. I could see the interstate ahead, cars passing normally, lit by headlights and moonlight. I merged back onto I-25 and drove for an hour without stopping, without even slowing down. When I finally pulled over at a well-lit truck stop, I checked myself in the bathroom mirror. I was pale and shaking, but otherwise fine. Then I noticed my hands, the ones I'd washed at the rest area. There was something on them. A fine, gray dust that I hadn't noticed before. It looked like ash. I washed it off, but it kept reappearing, seeping out from my pores. I scrubbed until my skin was raw, and finally it seemed to stop. Later, I tried to find exit 666 on maps. It doesn't exist. I drove that route again 2 weeks later in daylight, looking for it. There's an exit 664 and an exit 668, but number 666. No rest area. No off-ramp. But I have proof it was real. That gray dust still appears on my hands sometimes, especially at night. And sometimes, when I'm driving through New Mexico, I see that figure in my mirrors, far in the distance, standing by the side of the road. Waiting. Always waiting. Story 8. The passenger I picked up. I broke my own rule. Never pick up hitchhikers. Never, ever. But it was raining so hard I could barely see the road, and when my headlights caught the kid standing on the shoulder, soaked to the bone, I just couldn't drive past. He looked about 18, maybe 19. Skinny, wearing a wet hoodie and jeans. He was shivering so badly I could see it from my truck. I pulled over and opened the passenger door. "Get in," I called out. He climbed in without a word, bringing a smell of rain and something else. Something musty and unpleasant, like old wet cardboard. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the rain pounding on the roof. "Where you headed?" I asked, pulling back onto the highway. "Wherever you're going is fine." Strange answer, but I let it slide. I cranked up the heat for him. "There's a rest stop about 30 miles ahead. I can drop you there. Maybe someone can give you a ride into town." He nodded and stared out the windshield at the rain. Water dripped from his hair onto the seat. We drove in silence for a while. I tried to make conversation, but he only gave 1 or 2 word answers. Where was he from? Around. Where was he going? Anywhere. Did he have family? Not anymore. That last answer made me uncomfortable, but I didn't push it. After about 20 minutes, I noticed he was still shivering despite the heat being on full blast. His lips were turning blue. "You okay?" I asked. "You need a doctor? You might have hypothermia." He turned to look at me for the first time since getting in the truck. His eyes were strange. The pupils were too large, taking up almost his entire iris. "I'm always cold now," he said. "Ever since the accident." "What accident?" He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "The one you caused." My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" 3 years ago. This same highway. This same rain. You were driving too fast, you hydroplaned, you lost control. You sideswiped a car and sent it off the road. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. There had been an accident. 3 years ago. I'd felt my truck slip in heavy rain, felt it hit something. But when I pulled over to check, I saw no damage to my truck, no sign of an accident. I'd convinced myself I'd hit a guardrail or some road debris. I'd never reported it. You left me there, the kid continued. You left me trapped in that car, upside down in a ditch filled with water. I screamed for help until my throat bled. I tried to break the windows, but they wouldn't shatter. The water kept rising. It covered my chest, my neck, my mouth. I drowned in that car while you drove away. No, I whispered. No, I didn't. I thought it was just the guardrail. You knew, he said, his voice harder now. You felt the impact. You knew you hit something solid. But you were scared, so you ran. Tears were streaming down my face. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't help me. Sorry doesn't change anything. I've been standing on this highway for 3 years, waiting for you to come back. Waiting for you to feel what I felt. I looked at him in horror. His skin was pale, almost translucent. Water was running from his hair, his clothes, pooling on the seat. Not rainwater. This was darker, thicker. It looked like ditch water, full of mud and algae. What are you? I whispered. I'm what you made me. I'm the guilt you've been running from. The cab was filling with water. Not from him, but from everywhere. It was seeping through the dashboard, through the floor, through the doors. Rising quickly. Stop the truck, he said. No. Stop the truck. His voice was no longer human. It was the sound of gurgling water, of choking, of drowning. Water was up to my ankles now, freezing cold. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I knew I'd never start again. I pressed harder on the accelerator. "You can't outrun this," he said. "You can't outrun me." The water was at my knees now, climbing fast. The engine sputtered. Water was somehow getting into the mechanics, killing the truck from the inside. "I didn't mean to kill you," I screamed. "It was an accident. And this is justice." The engine died. The truck rolled to a stop in the middle of the highway. Water continued pouring in, up to my waist now. The kid watched me calmly as I struggled with the door handle. It wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't roll down. "Now you know," he said. "Now you know what it's like." Water reached my chest, my throat. I tilted my head back, gasping for air. The last thing I saw was his face, calm and peaceful, as the water covered everything. I woke up on the side of the highway, lying in the mud. A state trooper was standing over me, speaking into his radio. My truck was 50 yards away, stopped in the middle of the road with flashers on. "You're lucky," the trooper said. "Driver behind you saw your truck stop suddenly. He said you jumped out and collapsed. Looks like you had some kind of seizure." I looked at my truck. The passenger door was open. The seat was dry. No sign of water, no sign of the kid. There was someone in my truck, I gasped. "A passenger." The trooper shook his head. "There's nobody. Just you." They took me to the hospital. The doctors said I'd had a panic attack combined with exhaustion. They recommended I take time off from driving. But I know what happened. And 3 days later, when I finally worked up the courage to check my truck, I found something in the passenger seat. A wallet. Old, waterlogged, falling apart. Inside was a driver's license for a kid named Jason Martinez. Date of birth, March 15, 2002. And a date I'll never forget below that, date of death, April 3rd, 3 years ago. The same night as my accident. The same stretch of highway. I drive differently now. Slower. More careful. And I stop whenever I see an accident, no matter how small. I report everything. Because I know Jason is still out there, standing by the road in the rain, waiting for the next driver who runs away from their mistakes. And sometimes, late at night, I still smell that musty odor in my cab. Still find puddles of dark water on the passenger seat. He's not done with me yet. Story 9, the weigh station that checked more than weight. Every trucker knows the drill at weigh stations. Pull in, roll onto the scale, wait for the green light, drive out. It's routine, boring, and usually takes less than 5 minutes. But the weigh station on Highway 77 in Oklahoma checked more than just weight. I was hauling timber from Texas to Kansas. It was mid-afternoon, sunny and clear. I saw the weigh station sign and followed the mandatory truck lane, pulling onto the scale platform. The light stayed red longer than usual. I waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Other trucks were getting processed quickly in the other lanes, but mine stayed red. Finally, a voice crackled over the speaker. "Driver, please proceed to the inspection area." Random inspections weren't unusual, but something about the voice bothered me. It was flat, emotionless, almost robotic. I pulled forward into the covered inspection bay. A man in a DOT uniform walked over, carrying a clipboard. He moved stiffly, like his joints hurt. "License and registration," he said. I handed them over. He looked at them for a long time, too long. Then he looked up at me with eyes that didn't quite focus correctly. "Step out of the vehicle." Full inspection. I climbed down. 3 more DOT officers appeared, surrounding my truck. They moved with the same stiff, mechanical precision. "Pop the trailer," one of them said. I opened the trailer doors. They climbed inside with flashlights, examining the cargo. I heard them moving things around, which was unusual. Inspectors typically just look, they don't touch cargo. One of them emerged carrying something. A small wooden box I'd never seen before. "What's this?" he demanded. "I don't know. That's not my cargo. I'm hauling timber." He opened the box. Inside was a human tooth. "Come with us," he said. They led me into the weigh station building. It looked normal from outside, but inside was wrong. The hallways were too long, stretching back farther than the building should have allowed. The lights flickered constantly. And there were rooms, dozens of rooms, all with closed doors. They took me to an interrogation room. Small, windowless, with a metal table and 2 chairs. They left me there alone for what felt like hours. When the door finally opened, a different person entered. A woman in a business suit. She sat across from me and smiled, but the smile was wrong. Too wide. Too many teeth. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. "Because your officers found something that isn't mine." "Oh, but it is yours. Everything in your truck is your responsibility. I didn't put that box there. Someone must have planted it." She tilted her head at an unnatural angle. "We find things in everyone's trucks. Things they don't remember loading. Things they didn't know they were carrying. Would you like to know what we found in yours?" I didn't answer. She opened a folder and spread photos across the table. They showed the inside of my trailer. But in these photos, there wasn't just timber. There were dozens of those small wooden boxes, tucked between the logs, hidden in shadows. "I swear those weren't there when I loaded," I said, my voice shaking. "They're always there. You just don't see them until we make you look." "What's in the boxes?" "Guilt. Fear. Secrets. Everyone carries them. We just make them visible." She leaned forward, and I saw that her eyes were completely black. No whites at all. "Would you like to open more boxes? Would you like to see what else you've been hauling?" "No. I want to leave. You can't hold me here without charging me with something." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Charging you? We're not the law. We're something much older than that. This hasn't been a real weigh station for 40 years. I stood up and headed for the door. It was locked. I pounded on it, shouting for help. The woman just watched, still smiling. "You can leave any time you want. But you have to pay the toll first." "What toll?" "Confess. Tell me one secret you've never told anyone. The worse, the better. That's the price to leave." I thought about refusing, but something told me I'd be stuck in that room forever if I didn't comply. So I told her. I told her about the time I deliberately didn't report a safety violation because fixing it would have cost me a week's pay. 2 months later, a driver using that same route died in an accident. Maybe it wasn't related to the violation I'd ignored. But maybe it was. As I spoke, the woman's smile grew wider and wider until it split her face in half. Behind the split, I saw not a mouth, but darkness. Endless darkness. When I finished, she nodded. "Acceptable. You may leave." The door opened on its own. I ran down those impossible hallways, burst out of the building, and sprinted to my truck. The DOT officers were gone. The inspection bay was empty. I drove out of there as fast as legally possible, not looking back. When I checked my trailer at the next stop, the boxes were gone. Just timber, loaded exactly as it should be. But sometimes, when I'm hauling cargo, I wonder if those boxes are still there, invisible, filled with all the secrets I carry. And I wonder what toll I'll have to pay the next time I can see them. Because I know that weigh station is still there, checking trucks, finding boxes, extracting confessions. And one day, I might have to stop there again. Story 10, the radio station that played my life. The last story I have to share is the one that finally made me quit long-haul trucking. It happened just 6 weeks ago, and I still can't explain it. I was driving through West Virginia on Route 119, late at night. My regular radio stations had faded to static, so I was scanning for something, anything, to keep me company. I hit 89.3 FM and found a signal. Clear as crystal. A man's voice, deep and smooth, like a professional radio host. And we're back with Late Night Drives, the show that knows you better than you know yourself. This next segment is dedicated to our special caller tonight, Marcus Henderson. That's my name. My full name. Marcus is driving through West Virginia right now, hauling electronics to Pittsburgh. He's tired, he's lonely, and he's thinking about his ex-wife, wondering if leaving her was the biggest mistake of his life. I pulled over onto the shoulder, my heart racing. I grabbed my phone to look up the station. 89.3 FM didn't exist in this area according to any database. The voice continued. Marcus is also thinking about the bottle of pills in his glove compartment. The ones his doctor prescribed for anxiety. He's thinking about taking too many, just to see what would happen. I stared at the glove compartment. There were pills in there. I'd been prescribed them last month during a particularly rough patch. How did this radio host know? Don't do it, Marcus, the voice said gently. Not yet, anyway. We have so much more to talk about first. Like that night in Dallas. Remember Dallas? I did remember Dallas. A night 2 years ago I tried to forget. A night I'd been drunk at a bar and got into a fight with another driver. He'd fallen, hit his head. I'd left him there unconscious. He survived, but I'd never known if he'd reported it or if he even remembered me. He remembered you, Marcus. His name was Robert Chen. He spent 3 months in physical therapy because of that head injury. Lost his commercial license. Lost his job. His wife left him. All because you couldn't control your temper. How do you know this? I shouted at the radio. We know everything, Marcus. Every secret. Every mistake. Every moment you wish you could take back. And now we're going to play them all for you. Think of it as a radio documentary. The life and times of Marcus Henderson, presented without commercial interruption. For the next 3 hours, that voice narrated every awful thing I'd ever done. The time I cheated on my wife. The time I stole money from my brother. The time I saw a car accident and drove past without calling for help because I was already late for a delivery. Every shameful moment, every cruel thought, every selfish decision. And between segments, they played music. Songs I'd loved, but twisted somehow. The melodies were off-key, the lyrics distorted into mocking versions of the originals. I tried to change the station. It wouldn't change. I tried turning the radio off. It stayed on. I even pulled the power cable. The radio continued playing, powered by nothing. You can't escape this, Marcus, the voice said. You've been running from your past for years, but tonight it catches up. Tonight, you face everything you are. I got out of my truck and walked away from it, but I could still hear the broadcast. It was coming from my phone now, even though my phone was locked and off. It was coming from everywhere, from the air itself. Other drivers began pulling over, asking if I was okay. I must have looked insane, hands over my ears, screaming at invisible speakers. One driver, an older woman, grabbed my shoulders. Son, you're having some kind of episode. Let me call for help. But when she pulled out her phone, the broadcast was playing from hers too. And her face went pale as she listened. This is Lisa Templeton, the voice said. She's listening now. She thinks she's helping Marcus, but she has secrets of her own. Should we share them, Lisa? The woman dropped her phone and backed away from me like I was contagious. The broadcast continued for 6 hours. By the time the sun rose, I was sitting on the side of the highway, completely broken. The voice had revealed every terrible thing I'd ever done, thought, or even considered. And then, as sunrise painted the sky orange and pink, the voice said, "That concludes our special broadcast. Thank you for listening, Marcus Henderson. We'll be here whenever you need us. And you will need us. Because now that you've heard your life played back, you can never unhear it. Good luck living with that. The radio went silent. My actual radio was off. Powered down. The cable unplugged. No electricity, no signal, nothing. But it had played for 6 hours. I had my truck towed. I called my company and quit. I couldn't drive anymore. Every time I got behind the wheel, I'd scan the radio dial, terrified of finding 89.3 FM again. Last week, I was in a friend's car. He was flipping through stations, and I heard it. That voice. Coming up next hour, a very special broadcast about Sarah Mitchell. Sarah is my friend's wife. I grabbed the radio and smashed it against the dashboard. "What the hell, man?" my friend shouted. "Trust me," I said. "You don't want to hear that station." Because I know that broadcast is still out there, finding people, telling their stories, exposing every secret they've tried to bury. And someday, it might find you too. When it does, you'll understand why I quit trucking. Why I can barely sleep. Why I look over my shoulder constantly. Because once that voice has spoken your secrets out loud, once you've heard your life narrated by something that knows you better than you know yourself, you can never feel safe again. The highway is still calling to me. I miss driving. I miss the freedom of the open road. But I'll never go back. Because 89.3 FM is always broadcasting, always searching for its next subject. And the highway remembers everyone who's ever driven it. All their secrets. All their sins. All their stories. The highway remembers everything.